My first version of this video had 69 pages of notes, which would make for an approximate 4-hour long video. So I've condensed it and broken it into 2 parts. This has taken days. This video has 60 books coming in the first 3 months of the year, or as I like to call it, a compelling argument as to why TBRs can't get smaller. Everything here is literary fiction as long as we use a broad and inclusive definition of that term. So litfic with all the fuzzy adjacent stuff. We've got some of my favourite authors, Booker Prize, Women's Prize and Nobel Prize winners, the child of a literary great, exciting debuts, translated fictions, books from every continent, and along the way I'll be letting you know my most anticipated releases for 2025. I'm going to go through the books in order of release dates, but please check the dates for your location. Coming on January 7th, so it's already out, is The Granddaughter by Bernhard Schlick, translated from German by Charlotte Collins. This is a novel about a man who escapes from East Germany for the West, only to find out many years later his wife gave up a child and tracks down his granddaughter. Schlick has a fantastic reputation. Mothers and Sons by Adam Haslett. Peter, a gay, overworked and numb asylum lawyer, takes the case of a young gay man, which brings up memories of the event he has avoided for 20 years, and his estranged mother, long ago banished from her mind the decision that divided her from her son. Peter's case forces him and his mother to confront the secret that tore them apart. Coming on January 14 is Isaac's Song by Daniel Black. Forced to suppress his artistic pursuits, physical desires, and any notions that didn't align with the traditional view of masculinity as a child, Isaac has finally carved out a life of his own, only for the AIDS crisis and Rodney King's attack to extinguish his hard-earned joy. Isaac begins to write down his story, and a surprising discovery will either unlock the truth he's seeking or threaten to derail the life he's fought so hard to claim. Daniel Black is an author of absolute proven quality, a must-read author for me. Orome by Balu Gurma, translated from Amharic by David Degusta and Mesfin Felek. This is Ethiopia's most famous work, and it is finally in English. This is essentially a political spy novel that is detailing the Ethiopian government's determination to quash the Eritrean insurgents once and for all. Originally it was published in 1983, but it was quickly banned. Soon after, Balu Gurma vanished. He was kidnapped and murdered by the regime he called out, or so we assume. His body has never been found. I have said this before on this channel, and I will say it again. It is not a political statement if you read banned books and then you go and pick up novels such as 1984 or The Catcher in the Rye. You can find those books in almost any library or bookstore worldwide. Read them if you're interested in them. But the point of reading a banned book is to give voice to the suppressed and to fight for books to be available everywhere. So this is the sort of book you should be reading if you read banned books. And with that backstory, who doesn't want to pick it up? A Calamity of Noble Houses by Amira Ghenim, translated from Arabic by Milad Faiza and Karen McNeil. Tunisia, 1935. A young wife is accused of having a clandestine love affair with an intellectual, union activist and supporter of women's rights. Told and retold by 11 different narrators from the 1940s to the present day, revealing secrets, memories, accusations and regrets along the way. Good Girl by Aria Aber. Born in Germany to Afghan parents, Nilla was raised in public housing, graffitied with swastikas, drawn to philosophy, photographs and sex. Nilla has spent her adolescence disappointing her family while searching for her voice as a young woman and artist. As barely submerged racial tensions begin to roil Germany, Nilla finds herself in a controlling relationship. This book has been blurbed by Kaved Akbar, Raven Alani and Sarah Tankham Matthews, and I'm always curious when such different authors praise a novel. On January 21 comes We Do Not Part by Han Kang, translated by E. Yawon and Paige Anyan Morris from Korean. One winter's morning, Kayango receives an urgent message from her friend to visit her at a hospital in Seoul. She has injured herself in an accident and begs her friend to return to Jeju Island where she lives to save her once beloved pet, a white bird called Amma. A snowstorm hits the island when she arrives and she must reach her friend's house at all cost, but the icy wind slows her down as night begins to fall. She wonders if she will arrive in time to save the bird or even survive the terrible cold of the island. Lost in a world of snow, she doesn't yet suspect the darkness that awaits her at her friend's house. This is Kang's first novel since winning the Nobel Prize, one of 2 Nobel Prize winners in today's video, and it's going to be one of those books that might be a little bit hard to get a copy of because I think everybody's going to jump on it. Moving on to January 23rd, and it's Confessions by Catherine Airey. Cora was orphaned after the September 11 attacks, and then she receives a letter from an auntie offering her a new life in rural Ireland, the town where her parents grew up, where she can begin to unspool her family's past. This has fantastic early reviews. Quarter Life by Devika Reg. When the Bharat Party wins a divisive election, Narem returns to Mumbai from New York with Amanda. Narem's brother Rohit sets out to explore his ancestral heritage in the countryside when he falls in with the fiery young men who drive the Hindu nationalist machine. The term Bharat roughly means India, and it's a term that has taken on a nationalistic identity recently. The term nationalistic, however, has taken on a very Western colour lately with the rise of many far-right dickhead movements. Reading about this in India will not just show me how another culture does nationalism, but remove me emotionally enough from it so I won't need to use terms such as dickhead to describe them. Coming on January 28th is Good Dirt by Charmaine Wilkerson. 10-year-old Abby Freeman heard the gunshot, then she saw her brother lying on the floor. A crime that was never solved. The Freemans were the only black family in a well-to-do enclave, and the unsolved crime has a voyeuristic pull for the public, something highlighted 18 years later when Abby's high-profile romance falls apart without explanation. Abby flees to France to process what has happened, both now and 18 years ago. A stone jar that has been in her family for generations, brought north by an enslaved ancestor. But little does she know that the handcrafted piece of pottery held more than just her family's history. Charmaine Wilkinson's first novel, Black Cake, was nothing short of brilliant. She is such a gifted storyteller who I trust to bring to life anything she pens. This is one of my most anticipated books of the year. On January 29th comes Let's Call Her Barbie by Renee Rosen. This is a historical fiction about the creation of Barbie. Some of you are going to love that. Some of you are going to avoid that. Personally, I'm going to be waiting for a review, or maybe a dozen of them before I decide if I'll read this one. Coming on January 30th is Bethnal Green by Amelie Skoda, Penang, 1971, and Su-Yin Ling is offered a place as a trainee nurse in London's Bethnal Green Hospital, following the same path her sister travelled a year before. However, her sister returns to Penang, a shadow of her former self, and Su-Yin leaves without any answers as to why. Su-Yin soon finds herself falling in love with London and its people as she immerses herself in the grueling but rewarding work of caring for her patients. She begins to understand what she really wants out of life. Immigrant stories meet the hard work of nurses. One of the most worthwhile and vital jobs out there. I do love that little crossover. Nesting by Roshin O'Doyle. In a split second, Kira Faye grabs an armful of clothes from the washing line and straps her 2 daughters into a car, driving away. All she knows for certain is that home is no longer safe. This was meant to be an escape, but with dwindling savings, no job, and her family across the sea, Kira faces a broken housing system. Not to mention her husband's relentless campaign to get her to come back, because leaving is one thing, but staying away is another. This has already got me tense and wanting a resolution. That, along with some amazing early reviews, debuts, and this is a debut novel that has to be one of my most anticipated releases this year. Also, doesn't this just sound like a woman's prize novel? The Book of David by Jean-Luc Swanepoel. Leon met David naked on a San Francisco beach. Later, they began a relationship which will end in David's death. Leon retreats to South Africa and attempts to write David out of his system, but falling in love with David, loud, vulgar and uninhibited, was easier than falling out of love is proving to be. Sounds like my kind of cheerful, upbeat novel. Moving on to February and the 4th, we have Half-Truths by Nadia Marjouri. Khalidja, a mother in Marrakesh, is searching for her long-missing son. Zara, a daughter in Tasmania, searching for her own identity, packs up her and her baby and travels to Morocco in search of the father she has never known. But what Zara will discover is a culture she has missed, and she just may give a grieving mother the chance to move on. A Season of Light by Julie Iromuanya. When 256 schoolgirls are abducted from their school, Fidelis Oweki, a Florida-based barista, poet and former prisoner of war of the Nigerian Civil War, begins to go mad, consumed by memories of his younger sister, who went missing during that conflict, consumed by survivor's guilt, and fearful that the same fate awaits Amira, 16-year-old daughter, who bears an uncanny resemblance to her sister. Fidelis locks Amira up in her bedroom, offering no words of explanation, only lovingly making meals and sending sweets. This is all sorts of messed up trauma, intergenerational stuff. Sounds tragically sad for all involved. That's my book. Isola by Algeria Goodman. Heir to a chateau with its own village and lands, Marguerite is destined for a life of property and gentility. Then she is orphaned, and a volatile older man she has never met becomes her guardian, selling her property to pay his debts, and insisting she accompany him on an expedition to New France. Isolated and afraid, Marguerite befriends a servant, meeting secretly with him aboard the ship. But when they're discovered, Marguerite is marooned with her lover on a small island, condemned to certain death. Marguerite must learn how to hunt, live in a cave, and survive the island's ice, inspired by the real life of a 16th century heroine. On February 6th comes The Boy from the Sea by Garrett Carr. 1973, in a close-knit community on Ireland's west coast, a baby is found abandoned on the beach, named Brendan Bonner by Ambrose, the fisherman who adopted him. Brendan will become the source of fascination and hope for a town caught in a storm of a rapidly changing world. Ambrose, a man more comfortable at the sea than on land, brings Brendan into his home out of love, but it is a decision that will fracture his family and force him to truly understand himself and those he cares for. Bookended by the arrival and departure of a single mesmerising boy. Money to Burn by Asta Olivia Nordenhoff, translated from Danish by Sherilyn Nicolette Hellberg. Maggie and Kurt are a couple struggling to hold their marriage together after their only daughter has left home. They live in an old farmhouse but keep missing each other, unable to discuss the events that brought them together. Decades ago, a passenger ferry called the Scandinavian Star caught fire, killing hundreds of people. Years later, it was revealed not to be an accident, but the result of an insurance scam gone wrong. How is the Scandinavian Star disaster connected to Maggie and Kurt? How does money infect our closest friendships? And is it ever possible to escape? True crime come critic of capitalism with some messed up relationship stuff in there? Yummy. Coming on February the 11th, The City Changes Its Face by Emma McBride. December 1996, 20-year-old Ali and 40-year-old Stephen retrace the course of their love affair in search for what's gone wrong. Is it Stephen's reconnecting with his long-lost teenage daughter, Grace? Or that he's a well-known actor while Emily is still at drama school? Maybe the autobiographical film he has just made has brought his old demons back to the surface. Or perhaps Ali's youth has led her into the mistake that she doesn't know how to fix it. Because it's written by McBride, you know that this book is going to have a lot bubbling under the surface here, although you do wonder what the writing style will be like because she is an author that appeals to certain tastes. Living in Your Life by Abdallah Tay, translated from French by Emma Ramadan. 3 moments in the life of Malika. Malika's first husband was sent by the French to fight in Indochina in the 1960s. In Rupert, she does anything possible to prevent her daughter from becoming a maid. The days before the death of King Hassan II, a young homosexual thief, Jafar, enters the home and tries to kill her. Malika recounts with rage her strategies to escape the injustices of history, to survive and to have a little space of her own. Based on the author's own mother, Talia is known to humanise North Africans' marginalised characters, the queer community, prostitutes, thieves, trans people. Idle Grounds by Christelle Bamford. A family party on the edge of the woods and a troop of cousins lose track of their youngest and set out to investigate for themselves. Into the woods that once comprised their late grandmother's property. The more the children search, the deeper they whirl, the more threatening the woods become and the more lost they are. Soon what began as a quest for answers will give way to a journey that undermines everything they've been told about who they are, where they come from and what they deserve. Literary horror with a hint of mystery. That is definitely a novel for a certain mood. Mazel Tov by Ali Zazovsky. Adam Wesman's bar mitzvah party turns into a glorious catastrophe. A nation on the cusp of war and a boy on the cusp of manhood. A choir of voices narrate this party. Abby, who points the way to joyful transgressions. Khalid, a Palestinian poet who offers a glimpse of a different way to be, and Adam himself, filled with shame and queer desire as he faces the brokenness of the world in which he lives. Luca by Alessandro Herrera. Best friends Sal and Charo arrive in New York, dreaming of making the US their home. Charo left San Domingo to escape the life of domesticity, but soon finds herself in that exact situation. Sal, on the other hand, fled San Domingo after an unspeakable tragedy, hoping that that distance would allow himself a fresh start. But trauma keeps him in its grip, and he's unable to move on until he meets Vance, who challenges him to confront his trauma, while Charo befriends Ella, a trans woman. Sal and Charo soon find themselves part of the queer intersectional community who disrupt the status quo of gender politics and conformity, allowing both to create the families and identities they've always wanted and longed for. Deviants by Santanu Bhattacharya. Vivian's supportive parents knows he is gay, but they don't know what he gets up to on the online world. He has fallen in love. For his uncle, things were different. Mambro's life changed forever when he fell for a male classmate at the time, and in a country where homosexuality was criminalised. Mambro's uncle Sukumra was also in love with a man, but forced by social taboos to keep their relationship a secret at all cost. He would never live the life he yearns for, but his story would ignite and inspire his nephew and his grandnephew after him. Salutation Road by Salma Ibrahim. This is a sliding doors novel. Saria Ali is a 23-year-old British Somalian woman supporting her mother and younger brother. Boarding a bus to work, she finds herself transported from London to Mogadishu, Somalia, and suddenly she's Yuba, the woman she could have been, had her parents never fled to London during the Somali Civil War. Back home in Greenwich, Sirad must go on with life, consumed by all she now knows. But then Yuba mysteriously appears in London, and Sirad begins to understand that nothing will ever be the same again. The Boyhood of Cain by Michael Amherst. Danny's family lives in a large house close to the school where his father is headmaster, giving Danny certain privileges, but also setting him apart from his classmates. When a new boy, Philip, for whom everything seems easy, arrives, he surprises Danny by wanting to be his friend. So when he and Philip are invited to work after school with inspiring artistic teacher Mr. Miller, Danny believes he has found somewhere he can shine, until Danny's father loses his job and their house, and then Danny finds himself shut out from Mr. Miller and Philip's world too. Desperate to make amends, he keeps trying to find a way back in. But will Danny's efforts send things spinning beyond everyone's control? On February 18th comes On Greenwich Line by Shadi Lewis, translated from Arabic by Catherine Halls. A frustrated local government employee tries to figure out what the latest policy announcement means for both himself and the migrants he works with every day. He finds himself roped into organising the funeral of a young Syrian refugee, and he begins to realise how much he has in common with those who have fallen through the cracks. On Greenwich Line traces the absurdity of racism, austerity and bureaucracy in contemporary England. This is a story about systemic failure and human courage, and about London and its many lost souls. On February 20th comes We Pretty Pieces of Flesh by Caldwell Brown. Doncaster is the home of Rach, Shaz, Cal, Bezzies since childhood, and Donny Lasses through and through. They share everything from blagging their way into nightclubs to taking pregnancy tests at family planning when they're late. Never mind that Rach is sceptical of Shaz's bolder plots, or that Shaz, who comes from the rougher end of town, feels left behind when others begin charting a course to uni, or that Kel sometimes feels split in two trying to keep the peace. Their friendship is as indestructible as they are, but as they grow up and away from each other, a long festering secret threatens to rip the trio apart. This novel has been praised by Ferdia Lennon, Elizabeth McCracken, Emma McBride and Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenner, and they are very different authors, and then on top of that it's being compared to Shuggie Bain. This just screams that it is appealing to a large audience, and that only happens with exceptional books. And even though it is a debut novel, and maybe potentially because it is written in a Yorkshire dialect, this is one of my most anticipated releases. Also, what a great title, We Pretty Pieces of Flesh. On January 25th comes What You Make of Me by Sophie Madeline Dess. Dimitri and his sister Ava are as fiercely competitive as they are codependent. Ava, defiant and impassionate, grew up in the shadow of soft, charming and intellectual Dimitri. But in the aftershock of family's trauma, it is Dimitri who finds himself emotionally ruined, whereas Ava has no time nor patience for grief. As they grow up, Ava throws herself into her obsession with art, winning fame and financial stability, while Dimitri flounders in his own work, unable to escape the wake of tragedy, until, that is, he decides to make Ava his subject. The siblings then fall in love with the same person, an Italian gallery owner. I do enjoy sibling relationships in the fiction I read, probably because, like I imagine a lot of you out there, I am a sibling. Fagin the Thief by Allison Epstein. This is a reimagining of the story of Fagin from Oliver Twist, the pickpocket, the thief, you know. I don't think anybody needs to know anything else about that. Either you're interested in it or you're not. But there's a lot of potential in this book, and it's following in the veins of books like Demon Copperhead and James. We're starting to see how powerful and varied and popular reimaginings are. On February 27th comes Before We Hit the Ground by Selali Fiamanya. Following Alum and his family in the years before his unexpected death, including Ben, his lover, Alum struggles to fit in. All he ever wanted to do is to feel understood. But what does that mean, to live authentically, when the only thing changing faster than the world around you is the world within you? This novel is intriguingly set in Accra, Glasgow and London. A House for Miss Pauline by Diana McCaulay. Pauline Spencer knows she will not live to see her 100th birthday, and decides to leave the only home she has ever known in a desperate mission to uncover the truth. Pauline has lived an extraordinary life, educating herself through stolen books, becoming a successful ganja farmer, and burying secrets, including the mysterious disappearance of the man who came to claim the very land in which she built her home. Cloudless by Rupert Dastur. Autumn 2004, a family endures an agonizing wait for their son to return from Iraq, yet there are other pressing concerns to be met working the farmland. John falls once more into his gambling habits, even as the farm sits on the brink of bankruptcy. Catherine begins an affair with an old flame from the city, glimpsing a life entirely different to her own. As members of the family grasp at their own tenuous lifelines, they drift from each other until one faithful knock at the door. By far the biggest date in the bookish world this year, or at least for new releases, must be March the 4th. So many books are coming on this day. So many excellent authors are dropping books. Universality by Natasha Brown. On a Yorkshire farm, in the midst of a rave, a young man is nearly bludgeoned to death with a solid gold bar. A journalist sets out to uncover the truth surrounding the attack, connecting the dots between an amoral banker landlord, an iconoclast columnist, and a radical anarchist movement that has taken up residence on the farm. She solves the mystery, but her viral expose raises more questions than it answered. Who wrote it? Why, and how much of it is true? Through a voyeuristic lens and with a simmering power, this book focuses in on what we say, how we say it, and what we really mean. Not only does this book sound fantastic, but it is one of my most anticipated books of the year, and if it isn't yours, I can only assume that you haven't read Brown's first book, Assembly. Brown is a very rare talent. Signs of Damage by Diana Reid. The Kelly family's French holiday is disturbed when 13-year-old Cass goes missing. She's discovered uninjured hours later, the incident dismissed as a close brush with tragedy. 16 years later at a family funeral, Cass collapses. The present and the past start to collide as buried secrets come to light and old doubts resurface. What really happened to Cass, and what's wrong with her now? One of the hottest writers in Australia at the moment, and by all accounts this is a return to form from Reid, whose last book wasn't in the slightest bit bad, but maybe fell short of her first incredible novel, one of my most anticipated reads of 2025. Wild Dark Shores by Charmaine McCaulay. Dominic Salt and his 3 children are caretakers and the last inhabitants of Shearwater, a tiny island not far from Antarctica, home to the world's largest seed bank. During a storm, a woman washes up on shore. As the Salts nurse the woman Rowan back to life, an affection grows between this woman and this family. Rowan isn't telling the whole truth, but when she discovers a freshly dug grave, she realises that Dominic has his own secrets. 100 Years of Betty by Deborah Oswald. Betty is 99 years and 364 days, and this is her story. A saga that captures the London Blitz, migrating to Australia, a whirlwind romance, anti-war protest, women's liberation, the AIDS crisis, moving to Mexico, becoming a screenwriter, friendship, motherhood, and being an intelligent woman in a world not ready for her, and living an amazing life. The Unworthies by Augustina Bastarica, translated from Argentinian by Sarah Moses. I say Argentinian intentionally. From her cell, a woman writes the story of her life in whatever she can find. Ink, dirt, and even her own blood. A lower member of the Sacred Sisters, deemed an unworthy, dreaming of ascending to the ranks of enlightened and pleasing the Sister Superior. Outside, the world is plagued by catastrophe. Cities are underwater, electricity and the internet is non-existent, and bands of survivors fight and forage. Inside, the narrator is controlled, punished but safe. When a stranger makes her way past the convent walls, she forces the narrator to consider her buried past. As the woman grows closer, the narrator is increasingly haunted by questions about her own past, the environmental future, and her present life inside the convent. How did she even get into the sacred sisterhood? Why can't she remember life beforehand? And what really happens when a woman is chosen as one of the enlightened? This sounds like Bastarica is doing her thing and blending horror dystopian and creating something searing. Yet another one of my most anticipated books coming on the 4th of March. The Tokyo Suite by Giovanni Madalosso, translated from Brazilian by Bruna Dantes Lobato. Maju boards a bus with Cora, the young girl she's caring for, and disappears. Fanadia, Cora's mother and a successful executive, is so engulfed in her own crisis, she initially fails to notice her daughter's disappearance. Her strained marriage means she finds solace in an affair. Her husband remains emotionally detached. Madalosso's narrative delves deep into the human psyche, examining themes of maternal guilt, societal expectations, and the search for personal identity. The Dream Hotel by Leila Lalami. Sarah has just landed in LAX when agents of the Risk Assessment Administration pull her aside and inform her that she will soon commit a crime. Using data from her dreams, the RAA's algorithm have determined that she is at risk of harming the person she loves the most, her husband. For his safety, she must be kept under observation for 21 days. Leila Lalame is a quality author, and this is the sort of speculative fiction I really love. Ask a question and explore it and make society react. This is one of my most anticipated releases. The Passenger Seat by Vijay Kurana. Small town America. Two boys or men embark on a road trip through the wilderness with canned food, second-hand camping gear, and a rifle they buy for reasons neither of them can articulate. The more they handle the gun, the further they get from their parents' house and their peers, girlfriends, and online gamings, the less their actions are bound by the usual constraints. When Adam decides to harass a young couple they meet on the highway, the outcome is irreversible. A searing examination of male friendship and the broader social implications of masculinity in an age of toxic loneliness. Coming on March 6th is Hunchback by Saou Ichikawa, translated from Japanese by Polly Barton. Born with a congenital muscle disorder, Shiraka Isawa uses an electric wheelchair and ventilator. She lives within her care house. She studies, tweets indignantly, and posts stories on an erotic website. One day, a new male carer reveals he has read it all. The sex, the provocation, the dirt. Her response? An indecent proposal. This has been very well received in Japan, and there are more reasons than I can possibly list here to tell you why I am interested in reading this book, but this is one of my most anticipated reads. Madame Sosostris and the Festival of the Broken-Hearted by Ben Okri. On the 20th anniversary of the day her first husband left her, Viv decides to host an unconventional party for those burned by love. She successfully ropes in her second husband Alan and their friends Beatrix and Stephen, and when she meets the famed fortune teller Madame Sosostris, last seen in T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, and rumoured to be the secret success to 5 prime ministers, she believes she's found the perfect act to headline her masquerade. In a sacred wood in the south of France, the partygoers disguise themselves and wait eagerly for the great clairvoyant, but the night soon goes awry, and in a comically revealing way that causes our couples to question their relationships and the direction of their lives. This has been compared to A Midsummer's Night Dream, and I would dismiss that for most authors, but this is Ben Okri, supremely talented and an author that we all pay attention to. I'm not sure there's a single author that I will discuss today with a more impressive CV than Ben Okri. Coming on March 11th is Paper Rock Grenade by Artem Chek, translated from Ukrainian by Alina Jennings and Oksana Rosenblum. I don't know about best book, but this has best title all wrapped up. When Timothy is 5, his small family grows by one, not with a baby brother or sister, but with the appearance of Felix, his mentor and tormentor, enemy and friend, Timothy's grandmother's sometimes boyfriend. "Who are you?" Felix screams from the depth of a confusion at all who cross his path, his memories of a Soviet-Afghan war clouding his eyes and senses. "Who are you?" Timothy asks himself. A gritty, realistic depiction of Ukraine and the post-Soviet world, an honest look into the life of somebody who is suffering from PTSD. It is a story of growing up without hope for a better future, and just when things begin to seem insurmountably dark, a friendship begins. Stag Dance by Tori Peters. This is a collection, 1 novel, Stag Dance, and 3 novellas. A lumberjack working in a legal logging outfit recounts how lonely woodsmen entertain themselves with a dance at which some of the loggers must volunteer to attend as women. In the lead up to the big night, the lumberjacks grow increasingly jealous of Lizen, the prettiest young man in the camp, weaving a surreal tale that questions the nature of traditions. This collection also contains Peter's previously released but very hard to get hold of Infect Your Friends, as well as 2 new novellas. Loved Ones is a futuristic world where everyone must pick their own gender, and The Chase, in which a secret romance turns cruel. Peters is best known for her first novel, Detransition Baby, which was just wonderful, and as such her follow-up needs to be one of my most anticipated releases of 2025. On March 13th, A Room Above a Shop by Anthony Shapland. When 2 quiet men form a tentative connection, neither knows where it might lead. M has inherited his family's ironmongering business, and when M offers B a job and lodging, he accepts. As the 2 men work side by side in the shop, they begin a life together in their one shared room above, the kind of life they never imagined possible, and that risks everything if the public performance were to slip. Unfolding in South Wales over 3 years during the decade of Section 28 and the age of consent debate, and against the backdrop of HIV and the AIDS crisis. The South by Tash Orr. When his grandfather dies, a boy named Jay travels south with his family to a property he left them, a once flourishing farm that has fallen into disrepair. Jay's father Jack sends him out to work the land, whatever is left, and Jay finds himself drawn to Shearn, the local son of a farm's manager, different to him in every way, except for one. Inside the house, the other members confront their own regrets and begin to drift apart. This is a story about what happens when private and public lives collide, and is the first novel in a quartet from Tash Orr, a portrait of a family navigating a period of great change. The Naked Eye by Yoko Tawada. Written simultaneously in German and Japanese, the English version is translated from the German version by Susan Banowski. A young Vietnamese woman travels to speak at an international youth conference in East Berlin. She is preparing to present her paper, Vietnam as a victim of American imperialism, but is abruptly kidnapped and taken to a small town on the west side of the Berlin Wall. One night she manages to escape on a train to Moscow, but mistakenly arrives in Paris, alone, without a penny to her name, and in a completely foreign land. She wanders the fringes of society, meeting a sex worker, a theatre troupe, and other shadowy characters. But at the centre of her new life is Catherine Deneuve, the film star. Everyone Says It's Everything by Xhenet Aliu. Adopted twins Dorita and Perit have no connection to their Albanian heritage. Though inseparable in childhood, their paths diverged as teenager. Dorita was to go to a good college. Pete was going nowhere fast. Fast forward to their 20s and Dorita has abandoned her graduate studies to move home and take care of the mother. She hasn't heard from her brother in 3 years, and when his girlfriend and their son show up unexpectedly without him and in need of help, Dorita becomes determined to find Pete. But discoveries about their Albanian roots, the war in Kosovo, and the story of their adoption surprise everyone, and will either be the thing that brings them together or tears them apart for good. Animal Instinct by Amy Shearn. 2020. Rachel, mother of 3, recent divorcee, is stuck inside. Her newly awakened sexual desire refuses to be contained. Trying online dating, leading to dates with men, ongoing flirtations with women, and finally, actually, in-person sex. None of them individually are perfect. Hence the rotation. But what if one person could be perfectly catered to all of her emotional needs? Driven by this possibility, Rachel creates Frankie, the AI chatbot. As Rachel plays with her fantasies to her heart's content, she begins to realize that she can't reprogram her ex-husband, children, friends or her collection of lovers. The Paris Express by Emma Donoghue. Based on an 1895 disaster, Donoghue explores the occupants of a Paris-bound train that will never arrive. Members of Parliament hurry back home to vote. A medical student suspects a girl may be dying. A secretary tries to convince her boss of the potential of moving pictures. Two of the train's crew build a life away from their wives, and a young anarchist makes a terrifying plan. Theft by Abdurazak Gurna. At the turn of the 21st century, 3 young people come of age in Tanzania. Karim returns to his sleepy hometown after university with a new swagger and ambition. Faiza glimpses in him a chance to escape from the smothering upbringing. The two of them offer a haven to Badar, a poor boy still unsure if the future holds anything for him at all. As tourism, technology and unexpected opportunities and peril reach their quiet corner of the world, each arrives at a different understanding of what it means to take your fate into your own hands. Stop me if you've heard this one before. Kirsten Arnett. This is a comedy about a lesbian clown trying to get her life together and figuring out the lines between art, life and work. And I didn't know I needed to read such a book, but it turns out anything with the words lesbian, clown and comedy in the description is a winner. March 20, Nova Scotia House by Charlie Porter. When they meet 30 years ago, Johnny was 19. Jerry was 45. They fell in love and made a life on their own terms in Jerry's Nova Scotia house. Johnny is still there today, but Jerry is gone, and so is the world they knew. Johnny remembers Jerry's radical philosophies of the many possibilities of love, sex and friendship before the AIDS crisis devastated their queer community. I Want to Go Home, But I'm Already There by Roshan Langan. This is a dark comedy, literary horror novel about renting, and as a renter I feel seen. Horror is the correct genre. On March 25th comes Nobody Asks for This by Georgia Taves. Between working the rounds of Toronto's small comedy club circuit and auditioning for paper towel commercials, Virginia is tiptoeing around her depressed roommate and childhood friend Hayley and having bi-weekly dinners with her bereaved stepdad Dale while trying to manage her own grief at the loss of her mother. She is also secretly working at getting a green card that will be her ticket to LA, and she hopes a glittering comedy career. But when Dale tells her that he wants to sell their family home, and when a date with a fellow comic turns into a shattering encounter, she is forced to confront the limits of comedy and friendship. Georgia is the daughter of Miriam, and when your mother is such a talented author, it must be hard to step out of her shadow. And blending comedy and grief is something very few people do well. Miriam Taves is one of those people. But this is a big risk for a young author, and I'm hoping that it really pays off for her, and that come April we'll all have to clarify which talented Taves author we're talking about. The Colony by Annika Norlin, translated from Swedish by Alice E. Oslund. Burned out from a demanding job and a busting life in the city, Amelie has spent a few days in the country where she encounters a mysterious group of 7 people, each with personal stories full of pain, alienation, and the longing to live differently. They are misfits, each in their own way. What happens when an outsider appears and is instantly drawn to their alternative lifestyle but cannot help stirring things up? That doesn't sound great, but this novel is massive in Sweden and has received all sorts of awards as well as a TV deal. On March 27th, On the Clock by Claire Baglin, translated from French by Jordan Slump. A father balances demanding shift work while a mother constantly prioritises the needs of others. But there is also happiness. A trip to the seaside, games, laughter, tenderness and support. A young woman describes her days working in a burger chain, exhausting repetitive labour, tricky customers and even trickier managers. It is an existence that marks the body and mind and governs a life, a compelling exploration of social inequality. Make sure you subscribe to this channel for part 2 of this video, in which we have the author of my favourite book of 2023, more Booker Prize winners, Sayaka Murata, Layla Motley, and the excellent works that Anne Goldstein is translating. I'd like to thank all my wonderful patrons for their support. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.